Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest live interview on Facebook and LinkedIn. Artificial intelligence is increasingly part of our everyday life. To discuss how it could be better regulated and what its opportunities and risks are, I am joined today by Mr. Dragos Tudorache, a Romanian member and also chair of the new Parliament's Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in a Digital Age. Welcome, Mr. Tudorache.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us. So before we get on the way with the interview, I would like to remind our followers to send us as many questions and comments as you wish, and I will also try to put as many as possible to Mr. Tudorache in the next half an hour. So let's get down to business. The European Parliament has recently put forward its recommendations on what AI rules should include concerning ethics, responsibility, and intellectual property rights. These recommendations will pave the way for the EU to become a global leader in the development of AI. So with Parliament's recommendations approved, when is the Commission supposed to announce its proposal on this field, and what are you expecting from it?
Well, according to the work plan announced by the Commission, the proposal on artificial intelligence is due for the first quarter of 2021. What will be the exact date of the release remains to be seen. I think on the part of the Parliament, what we want to do until then is to put the right political signposts for the Commission to hopefully follow in terms of what is the overall political landscape right now in terms of the big elements of vision, of strategy, which all political groups in the Parliament believe are important for the evolution of this important technology, artificial intelligence. So this is more or less the timeline we have, and until then also two other important pieces of legislation that are due to come related to data and to the governance of data. We all know that artificial intelligence without data doesn't exist. So therefore, when we speak of regulating artificial intelligence, we have to understand that there is this broader scope of regulatory frameworks which is due to come.
So indeed, when we speak about this regulatory framework, Parliament wants AI to be a human-centric technology. What exactly does this mean?
It's true that this sometimes here in Parliament and generally in the EU jargon, certain terminologies tend to become very quickly part of the jargon and become political slogans, and human-centric when it comes to AI, I think is one of them. Essentially what it means is that we believe that this technology should work for humans, that humans have to always remain in the driving seat when it comes to the scope of the output of a AI algorithm, no matter who designs it and no matter for which purpose. Also, what it means is that artificial intelligence and algorithms that are due to, let's say, compound data or lead to decisions that impact human lives, no matter in which sector, are part of those high-risk sectors or high-risk applications, types of applications, which need to be properly framed in terms of rules and regulations, so that we make sure that actually it remains human-centric, i.e. that it serves humans and human interests and not the other way around. Okay,
so we have already received many questions and comments from our audience, and I will go through some of them. For example, Aki Peterson asked on Facebook, from a technical point of view, what will be the regulatory framework that tells innovators and companies working on AI what they need to comply with?
Well, that is going to be the very fine balance that the Commission hopefully will try to strike when regulating. And this is something that we here in the Parliament are trying to instill very much as the political strategy that the Commission should follow. Because it's clearly important to regulate. I think everyone has reached that point where we understand that we need to put certain principles in how AI is to be developed and certain definition of the categories where regulation is important and for which sectors. But at the same time, all this cannot come at the expense of stifling growth. It cannot come at the expense of blocking startups, blocking businesses, particularly the smaller and the medium-sized enterprises, from innovating, from growing on behalf of this technology, which is there actually to support economic growth, and to also lead us into the industrial revolution that we all are going through now. So I think that this is going to be the biggest challenge for the Commission. And here in the European Parliament, in all of the discussions, I just come now fresh from a second hearing of the AIDA Special Committee. We had a discussion with Margareta Vestager, the Executive Vice President, and this was very much part of our conversation today with her. How is it that we managed to find a middle ground between the interests of regulating and at the same time the interest of encouraging economic growth?
Okay. And AI technologies such as self-driving cars or algorithms that could help select best job candidates could cause a serious breach of ethical principles and also could be dangerous. So let me ask you, who should pay the damage if a self-driving car does damage on another car? The programmer of the car, the manufacturer, or the owner?
That's a very good question, which I think has been haunting not only future regulators such as ourselves, but also the ones developing these applications of AI for quite some time. And I think partly also why it has not actually reached the stage of deployment as quickly as everyone believed a couple of years ago. So it's not only the technological challenge of actually deploying artificial intelligence, but it's also the regulatory framework, understanding actually how and where responsibilities and liabilities lie. What I think is something that we will do with the legislation that is to come is exactly to sort out these dilemmas. Who is responsible? Is the developer of the algorithm responsible for that? Or is the one who takes that application and actually deploys it for public use? These rules need to be very clearly set in stone. That is why we need regulation, because we cannot let important questions like these ones with open answers. And once that legislation will be there, it will also help businesses, because regulation can also be seen to protect businesses precisely from these dilemmas, which actually leave responsibilities right now, liabilities open, and that actually prohibits deployment for the public consumer of important technologies. So that is why also legislation, I think, comes for the good.
Mr. Tudoraki, you have just mentioned that it's a challenge to regulate artificial intelligence, but at the same time boost innovation and businesses to grow. So can you explain how the EU is planning to do that?
Well, first of all, again, we need to be very careful on how we regulate. I won't repeat what I have just said before, but again, finding the right node, finding the right nuances in how we are going to define high risk, low risk. Understanding that it is not just simply slicing the economic realm into sectors and labeling certain sectors high risk and other sectors low risk. That is not enough either. Because even within the same sector, you can have various nuances for each of the applications and for each of the outputs that may come from these applications. So first of all, the first challenge that we as regulators have to face is coming up with the right legislation, the one that actually brings the right differentiation between the different applications of AI, so that again, it serves for the good of creating a stable and predictable legal framework and not to block innovation. That is number one. Number two is that we have to put investment in the right place. If we want to be champions of such a technological marvel as AI, we have to put the right investments in place. And so far we haven't done it, or at least we haven't done it at the right levels if we look at the other global actors, the global competitors out there, the US or China. And that is the second thing that we have to do as Europeans. The third thing is to understand that we need to invest in education. We need to invest in attracting and keeping the talents that we have here in Europe. Because without that, it is impossible to hope that we can innovate and we can actually instill growth. And last but not least is to put on the right pedestal the work that is done in terms of research and development, because that, in my mind right now, we're not doing enough. We need beacons that are recognizing the importance of research here in Europe. We need to put and attract talent to those beacons. We need to network all of these research facilities, research institutes, which are right now investing a lot in artificial intelligence, so that we give them the recognition and the pride, I would say, of the work that they do.
Also, one of AI's promises is that it's neutral, so unbiased. However, Parliament noted that if the way that AI is programmed and the way it receives data is biased, then outputs will be biased as well. This could lead to discrimination in many factors like economic, racial, disability status, gender. How can the EU rules address this?
This is indeed a very important challenge, one that actually comes up in almost every conversation that we have these days on artificial intelligence. How do we make sure that the society of tomorrow in the digital realm is better, or at least not worse than the society we have today in the physical realm? In other words, how do we make sure that we don't carry over some of the biases, some of the prejudices that are affecting today's society into the digital world? And I think for that, also, again, legislation is important, because we have to make sure that we properly regulate how data sets, how training data sets are being fed, if I may express myself this way, into the algorithms, so that they don't replicate existing biases in the data sets. If we take any example, from human resource management to I don't know, probation systems which are using algorithms, to insurance companies that are using algorithms, if they work with existing data sets, with existing databases, there may be intrinsic biases, intrinsic prejudices when it comes to sex, when it comes to age, when it comes to social or economic status, so on and so forth. And therefore, we cannot simply allow that the data sets, that the training data is simply taken as it is and then replicated into an algorithms, because therefore, again, we are going to simply carry over existing biases, and that is something that we cannot afford to do. So again, through legislation, we will have to make sure that this data that is being used for developing algorithms is being scrutinized in a way that does away as much as possible with such biases and discrimination.
Let's move a bit to the uses of AI. We are receiving many comments on this, and especially there is one of Stephen Payne, and he says on Facebook, how do you see AI in terms of the environment? I think this is an important one, since also Green Deal is a priority for the EU.
So first of all, AI can be deployed for smarter, more efficient, more sustainable use of utilities, of public utilities. It is already known that, for example, when it comes to water supplies, artificial intelligence is being used to regulate the flow of water through the systems, through the supply systems of various municipalities, cities, and that is a very simple, practical example of how AI can actually help in more sustainable use of utilities. On the other point of view, we have to be very mindful of the, let's call it, the energy consumption that technology in general, artificial intelligence, the machines that are going to work behind the algorithms, processing all the data in order to produce the outputs that we expect from an AI algorithm, we have to see and make sure that is sustainable in itself, if we are to stay true to the Green Deal objectives that we have set to ourselves. And therefore, in all of the development of infrastructure, as well as in the development of the algorithms themselves, as well as in the way we're going to govern the data that is going to feed the algorithms of tomorrow, we have to keep the green objectives in mind. Because again, otherwise, we are not going to create a new industry, a new economy, a digital one that is actually better than the one we have today in terms of energy consumption and in terms of being green. So again, from how we're going to cool the next processes of tomorrow and of 10 years from now, to how we're going to cool the data centers that are going to represent the computing power behind the AI of tomorrow, all of these questions have to be answered as part of how we're going to set the green objectives of a digital industry and digital economy of tomorrow.
Big tech companies who use AI widely are wary of the EU's plans to regulate. In fact, Google has criticized measures in the Commission's AI white paper, which it says it could harm the sector. And not only tech companies, but a number of our followers are reluctant about the EU regulating this technology. For example, Hizer Muñoz says on LinkedIn, AI has so many good purposes. Why is regulation more important to the European Parliament than progress from AI? And also, Serban Subagu comments on Facebook as well. If the first reaction is regulation, the EU will let China and the US lead on this and miss the economic and well-being opportunities of AI. So, Mr. Tudorache, what would you answer to them?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that although it seems like AI is a technology that is now at its dawn, simply because we have started talking about it more in the last, let's say, 1 year or 2 years than we did before. AI has been here for quite some time, has been here with us, whether in Europe or in other parts of the world for actually more than a decade. In its incipient forms, even further away. So again, we have to understand that we are not right now jumping the gun and trying to regulate something that has just sprung to life. In fact, speaking of Google, but not only Google, all the other big tech companies, in fact, they have themselves come to realize that they need to work with regulators, and not only with regulators here in Europe. If you look also what happens across the Atlantic on the US, even though US, let's say, traditionally, historically, has not been quick on regulating a lot of what has to do with digital, they're themselves right now very much looking into how they can start setting rules for how the AI is being developed. So we have come to a point, there is a critical mass of will, let's say, of even expectation, I would dare say, on behalf of both the industries, but also of the society, to come and put some rules in place. And here, if we look at the approach that we have taken here in Parliament, but also the Commission has taken with its white paper, we have not rushed to regulate. Those of you that might have paid attention at the start of this political cycle, initially President Ursula von der Leyen has said that there will be regulation coming on AI in the first 100 days since taking office. That didn't happen. And it didn't happen because there was a very quick reaction here in Parliament and in interactions with the Commission where we have said, no, let's not rush to regulate before we make sure that we understand, first of all, what and how we need to regulate. How we define those sectors and those types of applications that actually need regulating so that we don't come with one-size-fits-all blanket regulations that would actually prevent allowing innovation and growth in a lot of important sectors for our economies. And therefore, I believe that with this approach that we have taken, us as Parliament, but also Commission and also Council, if I looked at the paper released by a number of governments last week, it pretty much goes in the same directions. Governments themselves, at the level of national strategies, have come to realize the same thing. That on one hand, we need to put some rules in place because the industries themselves and the businesses themselves need predictability in terms of knowing how and what they need to develop and within what boundaries, while at the same time putting this differentiation in place that allows for those sectors that need the freedom to continue to grow, to do so.
Thank you. And you have just mentioned that artificial intelligence has been used for years. So would you say that European business and institutions already use AI on a significant scale?
Well, I can't speak for all of the institutions and for all of the businesses. I think there are clearly sectors where artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time, even if the public hasn't known it. And again, another example why we need to put some rules in place because we need to know as consumers, without again creating too many barriers or too much burden, administrative or bureaucratic, but we need to know when decisions that are important to our lives are taken by an algorithm and not by a human being. And there are many sectors from banking to insurance to health to other sectors. Pretty much every sector possible, I think, by now has used in greater or in smaller degrees artificial intelligence. More sophisticated, less sophisticated, more incipient or more complex. And that is why I was saying that we are not rushing now to put an end to something that is barely starting, but we are now trying to put the right frame in place so that we move on to the next level of evolution and of development of this technology in a more controlled, but in a positive way controlled, in a more controlled fashion.
And it seems that not only use, but actually underuse too, is one of the major risks for EU. Could you explain this and what the Union is doing regarding it?
Well, that in itself, I think, is an argument for let's say, a clearer regulatory framework, but also for lifting a bit this topic at the level of the political conversation that we have right now around the topic of AI, both here in the Parliament, but also in the Member States and in the European Commission. Why? Because if we don't have trust, if we don't put trust and trustworthiness of artificial intelligence at the very center of the strategy that we're going to have in encouraging its development, we risk not having the uptake necessary for this technology to actually be relevant in our lives. And underuse, as you rightly call it, is as big as a danger for this technology as it is, I don't know, doing too much. And I think the best example we have is right at our fingertips with the contact tracing apps in the context of controlling the coronavirus. If a contact tracing app does not have the sufficient uptake by all of us living in a particular area where this tracing app is relevant and applicable, then it won't result to anything. It won't produce anything. It won't use neither the health sector nor the consumers to actually make any good use of it. So again, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that people don't take up on some of these applications? And mostly they don't because, number one, sometimes they don't have enough information. Second, if they do, they don't trust enough that application. They don't understand what it does. Maybe they don't understand what it does to their privacy. They don't understand what it does with the personal data that they will decide to hand over and be used by that application, so on and so forth. And that is why, again, the issues of explainability, of trustworthiness in AI, the principles that are going to be very much at the heart of the next regulatory framework that the Commission will come up with, are so essential also for the uptake of this technology in a broader sense in our societies.
So related to your answer, I would like to ask you something a follower is saying on Facebook. He's Ezra Kung, and he says, what will be the most valuable thing people can get from AI? I think it's a difficult one, but what would you say?
Well, I mentioned that I'm just coming from the conversation with Margareta Vestager earlier in the AIDA committee. And in fact, one of my colleagues MEPs asked exactly the same question. Really? What is maybe the best example of AI right now applicable to our daily lives? And I think that the first example that comes to mind is coming from the health sector, also because it preoccupies us so much these days with COVID-19 upon us. I think it is important to understand how much AI can actually help in diagnosing even chronic diseases. If we look at the incredible, let's say, results that are coming out of the use of AI in cancer diagnostics, this is, again, I think everyone understands, everyone realizes how important it is. Everyone realizes how much much of a fundamental change it can have to our lives to actually have a machine be able to help doctors, because it's not going to be the machine who is going to give us a diagnosis directly, but it's going to help doctors rather than having themselves to go through tons and tons of similar testing and be able to realize what is the right combination of results that can actually lead to a right diagnostic. Is going to be the machine using an algorithm that is going to do that in milliseconds. And with that, the doctors are going to be able to respond much quicker to the needs of the patient. So this is just one example. I think the most obvious, the quickest that comes to mind of how AI can actually help our lives.
But it's a very good one. But moving from great opportunity to a risk, Sheila asks on LinkedIn, how will we prevent AI from falling into the hands of governments that will exploit the technology for political gain?
Very good question. I often say in my participation in various webinars on AI that I fear Big Brother more than I fear Terminator. You know that there are all of these myths and legends about how AI is going to take over our world and destroy humans, a bit Terminator-like scenario. I don't believe in that, but I do believe in the risk of Big Brother. I do believe in the risk of public authorities, particularly in corners of the world where the value of individual freedoms is not so much high on the agenda of governments, that AI can actually be used for the bad. It can be used to increase the capacity of the state to survey people. It can be used for social scoring. It can be used for all sorts of things, which I would very much like to believe that here in Europe are never going to pass the test of our values. And that actually what differentiates us from some other places in the world where AI is used maybe on a broader scale, but for purposes for which we here in Europe would never allow AI to evolve. And again, I very much believe that when it comes to AI in the hands of public authorities, we have to be very careful, and rules would also have to apply to that.
Okay, so moving to jobs and skills now. Well, you briefly commented about it before, but AI technologies relies on skilled data scientists, programmers, and AI business translators who can put existing deep learning algorithms to commercial use, practical commercial use. But however, some studies show that EU struggles to keep AI talent. How can we make sure that the EU is at the forefront and can compete with other countries, as we mentioned before, China, US, or even the UK now?
I don't think we are speaking enough at the political level about this challenge. And we have to understand that if we want to be competitive, beyond the big talk about strategic autonomy and what are we going to do, what is our strategy towards China and what is our strategy towards the US, we have to understand that without human capital, there's not much we can do in this particular sector. And therefore, we have to have a very serious conversation at the political level on how it is that, number one, we retain the talent we have, and we have a lot of talent. We have very good schools. We have very talented kids, youngsters, researchers out there who are already working in AI, but we're not doing enough to retain them here, to convince them that there is a good enough environment for innovating, for researching, for starting up a business here in Europe, and they don't have to go across the Atlantic or somewhere else in another corner of the world. That's number one. Number two, we have to get past the hysteria of migration, the one that has been obsessing us for the last couple of years, and we have to realize that without allowing also and drawing talented people from other corners of the world here in Europe, we again won't be able to stay competitive. We need to become a center of interest for talented students, for talented researchers, for talented engineers from other corners of the world who would find it appealing, who would find it rewarding to come to Europe and either to study and then start researching or start a business here, or to actually continue what they do. So again, we have to focus a lot of our energy, both political and our resources, into creating an environment that allows for talent to stay and also draws talent to come in. If you look at what Canada is doing, who right now proactively, I would say aggressively, trying to attract talent from Silicon Valley to Canada, offering special programs for moving from the US to Canada. This is the kind of thinking that we have to do ourselves here in Europe.
Exactly. So related to your answer, I would like to read you a comment from our follower on LinkedIn. He's Gian Pietro, and I think what he says is very interesting. He points out there are many ways to regulate, and I would begin with educating the students and leadership in these fields with core principles and takeaways on the consequences of AI in our society and with our values. So thank you, Gian Pietro, for your comment. I think it's very valuable.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more.
Yes. And however, you cannot imagine how many comments and questions we are receiving right now of people asking, people scared of losing their jobs because AI. So what can EU do to ensure Europeans won't lose jobs because of AI?
Well, every new technology, starting with a steam engine, or I would even say starting with a wheel, has led to the transformation of how we used to do things before that new technology actually came in. There is nothing different with AI. Yes, indeed, AI is going to transform some of the way in which we do our work right now. If I'm a lawyer in a law firm, and right now my job is to sift through contracts and find what is wrong with them. Indeed, maybe in 5 years' time or in 2 years' time, an algorithm would be able to sift through the same contracts much faster than I do. Does it mean that I'm losing my job? Well, not necessarily. Because if I see that transformation coming, I can already start preparing my trainee lawyers who would normally do that into doing something else. And into learning how to take out the outputs that are coming from those algorithms of tomorrow, which will come much faster, and how to take them and then use them for the other outputs of my law firm. The same is valid for almost everything else. Yes, I think also we have to be realistic. Yes, AI is going to lead to the disappearance of certain jobs. But at the same time, it would lead to the appearance of others, maybe to the appearance of many more others. And what we need to do, and here this is a responsibility that we all share, we politicians and regulators, the same as the companies and the industries that are involved in developing artificial intelligence, but it's also a responsibility of us as citizens, is to be ready to adapt ourselves, to be ready to be flexible, to be ready to learn new skills and new competences, because that will be what will make us apt to follow this transformation that the societies are going to go through, both in our daily routines as individuals, as persons, as well as in our professional routines as workers in any sector of life.
Yeah, I think that in this, education takes a big role as well.
Of course. Of course. And education itself will also have to adapt to that. And the curricula of our schools, from primary school all the way to universities, we also have to take in the realities of this transformation to see what are the kind of competences that are intrinsically linked into the digitalization of our worlds, and then be able to transport those new competencies into the curricula of school. I think the wiring in the brains of our children is already doing that. If I look at how my kids are able to work with applications much faster than I am able to do that, it is because they are almost programmed right now to think in different patterns than we used to think when we were their age. And we have to also make sure that, again, the educational systems are very much staying in tune with this transformation.
Yeah, totally. I will also read a question from Laura Notaro on LinkedIn. She says, can AI be used in criminal justice and police activity without violation of human rights, such as protection of personal data or fair trial?
Very difficult. And this is one of the sectors that I would consider very high risk, and I will be very careful in how we regulate it, because I happen to be a judge by profession. I used to be a judge sometime early in my career.
Right.
I would never think that a machine would be or should be allowed to pass judgment on the case of a human being ever. It can help me, again, maybe sift through hundreds of pages of a file, maybe, and give me some results on which I can look and then carefully weigh in with other elements in the case, and then help me in reach my decision. The same goes in the penal system, in the probation system, because I know that algorithms of artificial intelligence have actually been used, have been tested in the probation systems of some member states. I consider to be a very high risk, because that passes, again, judgment on the behavior of individuals, on trying to anticipate the behavior of individuals, and that I don't think we should trust a machine to do, at least not solely.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Tudorake, we are reaching the end of our interview, actually, but before that, we mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you have been elected to chair the new Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in a Digital Age. Can you tell us a bit about your role there and why it's important for the Parliament to have a special committee on AI?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that this special committee exists. I've been advocating for it from the start of this mandate, because I do believe that because of this transformative role that AI is going to have in our lives, in our societies, in our economies, I do believe that it warrants special attention for us politicians and regulators, and also special attention in a way that goes a bit above the silos that we normally follow in the specialized standing committees that we have here in Parliament. And the main role of the special committee is precisely that, to allow us to get away from the very siloed work that we do either on individual rights in the LIBE committee, or on liabilities and responsibilities in the URI committee, or on industrial policy in the ITRE committees, and so on and so forth, and actually look a bit more horizontally at what AI means for all of these sectors together, for all of these possible applications of AI together, so that we can actually have a more joined up strategic contribution politically to the work that the Commission is going to do, or to the work that the Council is going to do as co-legislators. So I'm glad that the Parliament has recognized it. It shows also the ability of this institution to stay on top of the evolutions in our societies. I'm also convinced that this is a trend that is going to also be followed in many other national parliaments. I already hear that there are national parliaments in our member states who are already setting themselves up with special committees on AI. And I think this shows that this is something that is happening across the board. This is a realization that we all have, that we need to pay the right attention politically to this topic.
Yeah. And do you think that the creation of a special AI committee in the Parliament will help member states to give more importance to investment in research and technology? Because normally the countries that invest the most in AI are the richest. However, others like Spain, the investment is well below the European average. In addition, as you mentioned before, I could say that investment in research is vital to face COVID-19 right now.
Well, we're certainly attracting much more attention to this topic than ever before. I think it's evident if we look at the number of events on artificial intelligence, on the level of the conversation, on the attention that the governments themselves, the national parliaments are bringing on this topic. I think this clearly shows that everyone is now very much in tune with what happens with the evolution of AI. And that hopefully is going to also reflect in the way the governments are going to allocate resources, are going to allocate budgets, including the budgets that will be available from the EU funds that are going to be put at the disposal of member states as part of the new facility that is going to help reconstructing economies after COVID-19. And the digital transformation is very much part of the objectives of these new allocations. So I'm certainly hoping that all governments, no matter the size, no matter the attention that they have paid so far to digital and AI, are going to put it at the very center of their preoccupations.
So hope so too. So Mr. Tudorache, many thanks for this interesting discussion. Let's leave it here. And also many thanks to our followers for joining us once again. And have a lovely afternoon and take care.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you, and
My pleasure.
I'll come with pleasure anytime you invite me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.